Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California, this is Spiritual Fitness with your host, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk, and myself, JM. Spiritual Fitness is a program dedicated to exploring the timeless text and practices of Bhakti Yoga for people who want wisdom in their everyday life. We're close to 20 people on Zoom and close to 100 people on Facebook. I have Shivatsa helping me out today, managing social media. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome to Spiritual Fitness today. I think you're on mute.
Thanks, JM. Great to see you and good to see everybody else. I'm very glad to be back here with all of you today. And before we start, I offer my respects to my spiritual teacher and to all of you. Thank you for joining. Today, we'll talk about a subject that is intrinsically meaningful to everyone, in that it shapes our lives and it is the essence of who we are. What might I be describing, do you think? Something that we do every couple of seconds, if not at a shorter interval than that. The title of today's presentation is a real giveaway. What do you think? You can write it in the chat.
It's a breathing.
Think. Exactly. Very good. And one of the ways in which we think, I like that answer very much. What is one of the aspects of our thought process that oftentimes seems daunting? When we're thinking, maybe we come to a crossroads. Then what kind of thinking do we have to do? You see two things, maybe more. You go into a store to buy a pair of jeans, and it turns out there's not one kind, there's 50 kinds. Choice. Thank you very much. Yeah, choices. This is interesting because when we are moving about the world, or about our minds, or that our minds are moving and we're observing them, we'll see that there are various options. And one of the admonitions given in the ancient Upanishads, the oldest literatures in Sanskrit that talk about self-realization. Anyad evahur sambhavad, anyarahur asambhavat. Iti shushum dhiranam yena stadvichakshire. This is the ancient Sanskrit language, this classical Sanskrit. And in it, the author is saying that your choices are very consequential. And therefore, you should become wise. One of the words for wisdom or a person who is wise is dhira. Dhira means somebody who's sober, who's objective, who looks at the environment and notices that there are various qualities of energy. And if I engage with the higher qualities of energy, then I have a higher quality of life. If I engage with the lower qualities, then I descend. And who is it up to ultimately? Well, that's the scary part, because when it comes to assuming responsibility, oftentimes I'm not so eager to admit that whatever situation I'm in now is because of my own choices. So every self-help guru in the world will say the same thing, and that is, you're the master of your destiny. Otherwise, why bother? Why even listen to something like this or anything else that talks about improvement? So what is the crux of the matter? It is how I'm making my choices. So what is it? Who is it that's making choices? Well, I am, and what am I? I am a non-neural, non-chemical, non-temporal organizing particle of consciousness that's observing the environment. And my main activity, I can argue and will argue, is making choices. I decide from moment to moment what to pick up, what to leave sitting, what things to absorb my mind in. For instance, there may be choices of literature, maybe choices of music, maybe choices of association. What to speak of when impulses come into the mind, just as when waves on the beach, sometimes a huge set of waves will come in and you really have to duck under them. What do I do about all that? This is in the realm of choice also. And this comes back to us. It's always traced back to us. If you do a forensic study, we're the cause. But what is that? It's our volition. Volition means the faculty or power of using one's will. And that's endlessly fascinating if you ask me. What is willpower anyway? Where does it come from? We're not machines, we're not dead stones, but we actually have will. And what we'll talk about today is how to strengthen willpower, how to have a better informed choice-making process, so that when we do exercise our will, it's not going for naught. It is actually giving us an investment in our highest good. Does that sound okay? Reasonable? Okay. So first of all, let's try an exercise together to get some observation of the mind and the body. And when I say observation, it's implicit that we're the ones looking at our minds and our bodies. So if you'll sit up just a tiny bit straighter than you were a second ago, and then close your eyes, but remain alert. And then bring your focus to your breath and appreciate that you can breathe, and that it's bringing prana or life into all the cells in your body and mind, and it's coming as a gift. And relax, but stay alert. And as you exhale, mentally say out. And as you inhale, mentally say in, and keep your focus on your breath. If your mind wanders elsewhere, gently bring it back to your breath. And now, bring your awareness to your thoughts. A second ago, you might have not noticed your thoughts because there's a way in which I become absorbed in thoughts as if I'm carried away by the currents of a river. And I feel that I am my thoughts, or I'm simply moving with the flow. But now, as you utilize your volition to objectify your thoughts and look at them, you can notice that you're the one watching them and you are separate from your thoughts. Please breathe, relax, but remain alert, and just notice the subtleties of whatever is moving through your mental system, whatever it may be. The words sakshi means witness in Sanskrit. And the state of witnessing what you are not your mind, you are not your physical body, is called shakshitva. You are aloof. You are the watcher and the observer. You might note from your gross physical body that the lungs are like a bellows. They're working mechanically to bring in oxygen. You might notice for a second your stomach and notice that it's an independent organ that's digestive, sophisticatingly, intricately dividing up whatever you put into it and distributing it to various parts of your body. It's a highly technological, albeit biological entity. It's not you. You're the one watching it. And your mind is like software. It's very, very subtle, but you are more subtle than your mind. And that's why you can observe it. And it cannot observe you, because the subtler can observe the grosser, and the grosser cannot observe the subtler. You are the most subtle entity within the body. Take a moment to notice that you exist. And for a moment, entertain the idea that nothing else matters except for the fact that you exist. In fact, matter doesn't matter until you give it some meaning. By observing it and thinking, this is for me. This belongs to someone else. You designate it. So you can objectify your body, your mind, your intellect, which is like the most advanced Google system in the universe, bringing you answers, storing everything. But it's not you, because you can observe it. And now, as is recommended in the Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, and in the Upanishads, we'll utter a mantra which helps to focus all of our spiritual energy that's within the heart region. So bring your awareness to your heart area, and we'll say the mantra Om 3 times. Just listen to the vibration. And together. Stay in a state of awareness with mind alert and appreciate that you exist. You are part of the complete whole, and everything in that complete whole is completely perfect. We are the conscious awareness. We are always separate from the gross and subtle psychological body. Like air never mixes with mud. Although it may combine with mud, it never mixes. We are subtle, and we never mix with the body until we invest our consciousness within it and identify with it. Please bring your awareness back to your breath and take a couple of appreciative breaths that you're getting prana from the environment to maintain the miraculous machine, the human body. Rub your hands together to create some friction and bring awareness back to your external body. Slowly open your eyes and come back into the virtual room. And thank you very much, everyone, for taking that journey. This is a practice that anyone can take up because you're the owner of the body, or at least you're the resident for now. No lease was given. And you have the wherewithal at every moment to take a look inside. And this is the fulcrum of our power and our ability to be more functional even in the external worlds by having a more objective view of who we are, where we're seated, and what we're not. This is called in Sanskrit, aham brahmasmi. So aham means me, and brahmasmi means I am non-neural, non-chemical, non-physical. I'm something practically inexplicable. Consciousness is a miracle. And this is one of the statements of the ancient Vedas, ascharya vadati pashyadenam, that is practically unspeakable how amazing the conscious self is. And then janmadyasa yataha, that we emanate from a conscious source. We have an original conscious source. And all forms of incompleteness that I have in my life arise when I become detached from my source, from my conscious source. Yoga means connection. Meditation has the same root as medicine. It's a way in which we cure all ills by being reconnected with our original conscious source. And this is available to anyone, but there are ways in which we then have to move about the world and we have to make choices. And then what do we do then? How do we navigate the world in a meditative state? Or do we hesitate at every moment to touch anything? Do we renounce everything and say, I won't connect with the world because I'm not part of it? Do I go to a job interview and when they say, where are you from? I say, I'm from the spiritual world. I have nothing to do with this world. This isn't the advice given by the ancient sages. They say that we have a dual existence, just like having two passports. One is that we're not really part of this world, and the other one is that we are. So how to reconcile that? One is very practical, and one supports the other. When I have this sense of aloofness, the way of observing that I'm aham brahmasmi, I am actually not connected to the body and the world. I'm only hovering there, and I'm mixing with it only because of my choice. Then when I move about the world, my interactions become enlightened. Enlightened interaction with the world is what's suggested, and it's called yukta. Utilize everything for a higher cause by becoming aware of who you are and what your purpose is. So let's just see if there's any reflections from the meditation so far or any of the monologue. Anything that you heard that stuck, anything that's on Facebook or you want to put in the chat box, or feel free to come right into the Zoom room and boldly say whatever's on your mind.
We do have a realization on Facebook. Steve says, we are the consciousness. Consciousness is a miracle. We are a miracle. This is so powerful for everyone to start loving themselves.
Yeah, well, it's a good place to start developing actual self-esteem, right?
Yes.
Because when I see that I'm something that's permanent and not subjected to the changes, the oscillations of the mind and the world itself, then I develop a kind of steadiness. This is called nishta. It happens when someone takes up spiritual practice according to great sages like Vishwanath. Vishwanath teaches how there's a step-by-step process to spiritual awakening. And it begins with developing what's called shraddha. Shraddha. Shrad means the heart, and da is an active verb. It means where I place something. I get a kind of an epiphany that there's a higher reality, that this can't be all. Whatever I'm observing here, I have a sense that there's something more. This is the awakening of Shraddha. And I start to develop an inquisitiveness that leads me to associate with high-minded people who are discussing these types of things. And then from Shraddha, that means sadhu sangha. Sadhu means people who are sincerely inquiring also. And then comes bhajana kriya, or a regulated practice. That means, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes during some of the slides, one becomes determined and takes a few vows. I'm going to try this every day and stay steady with it. Then comes anartha nivriti, which means that you'll be harassed by your mind because now you're going in a different direction, and all the old habit patterns will come and say, just do something else right now. So it takes a little discipline to get through anartha nivriti, which is a sloughing off of old habits and developing a new consciously developing new habits and making new choices. And then after these kinds of obstacles become weakened, one comes to the point of nishta. Actually, this word in Sanskrit means to be steady. It's cognate in English with stand. If you look at the etymological dictionary, the word stand is derived from the word nishta. Shta and stand are the same. Means you can stand on your own 2 feet, you're not pushed around. In fact, there's an old poem I learned many years ago in Sanskrit Kamadinam katina katita palita durnidesha station jatamayina karuna natrapa no pashanti. And it's a spiritual practitioner saying, for how long and how many ways have I remained unconscious? I just did things automatically without considering the consequences. And I obeyed my senses. And he says in his poem that they were like bad masters. They were telling me to do all kinds of stupid stuff, and I just followed it. And then he says, Labdha Buddhi, I've gained my intelligence, and I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to deliberately practice now. And so now,
discuss a bit about Krishna and consciousness, the relation among them. Like, when you say Krishna consciousness, then is there a non-Krishna consciousness, or like things like that? What are your thoughts on that, please?
Well, when you say shine, ultimately all shine comes from the sun. Sunshine, all the light in the universe emanates from the sun. So you might see other lights that come from electricity, from batteries and so forth like that, but it's all stored energy that comes originally from the sun. So Krishna means our original conscious source. And so when we say Krishna consciousness, it's talking about the source of consciousness, the complete whole, of which we're part. Just like the sun has its energies. And if you look carefully at those energies, tiny photons, units of light that emanate from the sun. At once they are the sun and they're separate from the sun. They're one and different simultaneously. So our consciousness is part of the whole, but it's also individual at the same time. This is called achintya, inconceivably, beda, one and different simultaneously. So this is achintya. It's inconceivable to be one and different from something. But this is the conception that is understandable by seeing the analogy of the sun. So there are many different kinds of consciousness. For instance, there's dark consciousness, which comes from being separated from the source. So when I turn my back on the sun, then I see darkness, but darkness is just an absence of light. So whatever kinds of illusion or fear that I experience are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole and not having a connection or forgetting my connection. I always have a connection, but using my volition, I can turn away from it. And that's where choice comes in, because the choices I make to turn my consciousness back to source are what actually turn the lights back on. So it's a study of consciousness called Chaitanya. So we're studying, it's actually the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads are studying consciousness. And that means they're studying you. What are you? Because you're the conscious entity. Otherwise, stones don't read. They don't make choices and so forth. If you put a stone on the ground and you come back in 100 years, it'll still be sitting there unless it gets moved along by a lava flow or something. But if you leave your friend at a street corner and you come back in half an hour, he or she will be gone because they saw something else and they moved along. So consciousness is very different from matter. What else do we have?
Okay.
Anything there?
Yeah,
Yes.
I just wanted to add, when I was doing the guided meditation, my experience was, you mentioned we are part of this world, we are not part of this world simultaneously, and just kind of felt the same when you asked us to focus. Then at that moment, I was not in my room. I didn't even feel that I belong to this room. I didn't even notice my surroundings at all, because my focus was somewhere else. And when I reopened my eyes, I felt like, oh, wait a minute, I was here. And I went somewhere else for that time. So it seems, there is another word which we belong to, which we can definitely reach one day with the supervision and guidance, because
Well, yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I mean, we go through cycles even in 24 hours. When we sleep, we also go to far-flung places. During my dreams, I may be traveling here and there. I may be losing my suitcases, which is a recurring dream for me. I'm heading for an airplane, trying to make it to the gate, but I can't find my ticket. Where am I? I'm still sitting here in my room, lying here in my room, but I'm moving from place to place in my consciousness. So we go through various stages of consciousness every single day. And when we become, through the practice of yoga, one becomes more aware of one's position as the observer of the environment, including the internal environment, and is not simply carried away by the vicissitudes, sorry to use such a weird word, by the churnings of the mind, by the movements of the world, even around us. Okay, let's look at a few slides to talk about choice. We'll just go through them, and you all can please comment and say if we hit on anything that's worth looking at, and then I'll slow down. Okay?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Even the smallest decisions we make have a consequence in our life. And I'll talk about that word in a minute, consequence. But this is one of the aspects of being a conscious entity, is that we make choices. So cataloging those choices, or refining them, or refining the process through which we make choices, is transformative. As we talked about recently from the Yoga Sutras, you can come back in the room for just for a sec. We talked about in the Yoga Sutras the way in which the mind is a repository of images that we collect constantly through the various channels of our senses. And these are stored not just from the day or the week or the month, but for lifetimes. And when we come into the world, we have these stored images. And these are latent, but they're activated in certain circumstances. And they make us predisposed towards certain things. So I make choices apparently freely, but actually I'm being compelled by my samskars, or the previous images that are within the mind. That's why some people are adamantly for one thing and another person's adamantly against it. The same thing. And of course, sometimes somebody's adamantly for one thing, and then you might meet them later and they're adamantly for the same thing. We can switch sides and decide, oh, I'd like to go the other way. These are all products of the condition of our minds. Okay, let's see the next slide. Okay, so ultimately, it's more telling what kind of choices we make than the kind of body that we have or kind of talents we might have. Telling in the sense that when we make choices, it says more about us. And oftentimes, I like to use the phrase, you voted with your feet. Someone says, well, I'm not really into this. And then it's like, but you're here. You walked in. So, or they say, I am really into this. And it's like, where were you? You didn't show up. So we vote with our feet. You make choices by, when we make choices, we're actually indicating what our nature is, what our intentions are. Okay. So, as I mentioned during the meditation, that we're constantly choosing. And someone might say, well, I'll become nothing and I won't choose anything. But even that's a choice. Negation of consciousness, or saying consciousness doesn't exist. I think, therefore I am. This is an old standard. I think, therefore I am. So you may say, I'll become null and void. Who is it that's becoming null and void? You just made a conscious choice to become null and void and not make any choice. So that was a choice also. So there's no point at which, say the Vedas, that we become a non-entity. We're always an entity. We're always a conscious being. And even in deep sleep with no dreams, it's not that we're unconscious, it's just that we're conscious of nothing. And the choices that we are confronted with, again, are products of our previous conditioning. So desire plus decision equals choice. So desire is a natural condition of consciousness, as I was just expressing. It's not that you can snuff it out. And then when decision time comes, we end up with a choice, which is a strong word. Let's look closely at it. First of all, as I just mentioned, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, the other wisdom literatures say, Nahi kaschit shananamabhi jatu tishtati karma krit. There's always, we're always active, and activity means desire. So we can choose whether to engage in desires. We can also purify desires, but desire is in nature, a symptom of consciousness. Next. Just looking at the word, I was going through the etymology of this, and it may be a little hard to see, but it's always fun to break down the words. Where does the word desire come from? First of all, this word siddhas, which means a heavenly body, a star or constellation, as if it's coming from sort of from above. And then de means down from. So siddhas, de sideri in Latin, from the stars, desire is coming. It's kind of a descent of some power. And then it comes all the way down to the modern day desire. I just wanted to look at the interesting background of this word. Okay. It's also connected, according to the etymology, with the word consider. You can see this resemblance, sidiere and so forth. And think about the word consider. It means to fix the mind upon for careful examination, to meditate upon, to view attentively, scrutinize, not be negligent of, to reflect on, to study. Another linguist has an alternative idea from Proto-Indo-European. That's what pi means. Proto-Indo-European root of English, side meaning consider means to stretch, to extend, and a sense of the full word of survey on all sides or dwell long upon. So who's doing the stretching? Who's doing the examination? Who's meditating on it? That's you. When we observe our environment, we're considering it. And based on that, we have to make a choice. That comes in the form of a decision, which is a final judgment or opinion in a case, a resolution, fixing of our purpose. And I spoke about it earlier, the deliberate refinement of our decision-making process. We'll see in the next slide, this very interesting word, devote, comes from di, or de, concerning, and vovere, which means to vow. So when we make a decision, we're going to go in a certain direction. You can come back into the Zoom room for a second. Then there's this sense of vow. I always appreciate this word vow because there's a statement by one of the first mountain climbers who went up to Everest. And he said that until he decided, he made a vow, I'm going to I'm going to ascend to the peak no matter what. That's my life's goal. He said, until I did that, the energy didn't come, the facility didn't come. And he opined that until actually one makes that determination, makes the choice, the vow, I'm going to do this. It's a consolidation of our desires. And say, this is the way I'm going. And I plant my flag and I say, this is what I'm about. That's when the energy starts pouring in and I get the wherewithal to do something. So I always like the shape of that word, vow. It's got that V in the front, which is something that you could actually push down into the ground and like a wedge where it will hold. And when we make decisions and we have a decision-making process and we decide this is where I'm going to go, then the world starts to change around us. Facility starts to come to us from previously unknown sources. And I would suggest, and am about to suggest, and I'm suggesting right now, that that's what makes life exciting. That well-informed vows that I'm going to go in a different direction, that's what makes human life worthwhile, because we're moving towards our potential. So to do that, we may notice somebody else did something, ask them, how did you do it? Well, I made a determination that I was going to do it, and then I made a vow. I became devoted to it. Volvere. I had a desire, and I planted my flag. I put that wedge in the ground, and now the energies are moving around me. So what if I don't have any refinement of my choice, of my decision-making process, and I just take whatever comes along? Well, as David Byrne, the lyricist for the Talking Heads, said back in the 1980s, I don't know what you expect staring into the TV set. I mean, if you just let your mind roll or scroll or go any direction and pick anything at random, then your life will move in random ways, because where attention goes, energy flows, and we're moving by the power of our own decisions. We're so much more powerful than we even know. And all the power is in our refinement of our volition. Volition means vows. It means, I'm going to decide what to do, and I'm going to plant my flag. I'm going to put the wedge in the ground, and I'm going to move around that. So the ancient Vedas say, decide to move higher, to higher ground, to higher consciousness. And there's a way to do it. And you can do it by making a few simple vows to start to reform consciousness. And then everything, your whole world starts moving in that direction. Okay, I'll take another little pause here for a few reflections to see if we can expand on this. Anything that caught your attention from the discussion so far that you think we should augment? Be bold and put it in the chat box, or even bolder, come on the Zoom screen and say, this is what I think.
We have a question on Facebook from Shaila. She says, Shivas has posted. So she says that I'm trying a lot to change my thought process, but it's very difficult to do so. It's always I'm caught up in negative thoughts. I really want to change my thought, but in a minute, a nuclear fusion of thoughts take place and I'm helpless. How can I stop this? It's very difficult to live with positive thoughts all the time.
Well, you're not alone. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, that's 5,000 years old, this topic comes up in the 6th chapter. And the student who's learning yoga says, how do I control the mind? It's like controlling the wind. And the teacher, Krishna, gives the answer by proper practice and by detachment. So he indicates it is possible, but it takes practice, the correct kind of practice, and by non-attachment or detachment. And there's a way in which through practice one can control the mind. In fact, he goes on to mention that the mind can be the best friend or the worst enemy. And when we take time to tame the mind just as much as one might make friends with a horse, and then the horse and the person become good friends, and they cooperate together and they get a lot done. So similarly, the mind can be tamed. So it's not something that happens overnight, but what does happen overnight is one's outlook about it changes. Because as with any discipline in the beginning, when we make a determination, a vow, that means I understand that it can be done. And then I start moving in that direction, even if I'm not overnight a master pianist, because I just started. I do know that there's a process through which, by regular practice, I will become more and more proficient. This is the excitement of being a human being. We know we can improve ourselves by proper practice and by detachment. And so the mind also can come under control. One of the ways in which we regularly present in this session, in these sessions, is through mantra. Man means manas, or mind, and tra means to deliver. So through mantra meditation, taking time to do the kind of introspection we did at the very beginning, and then to repeat the mantra, which is an otherworldly sound vibration that brings a higher energy into our mental system and helps us to control the mind. I may not have the power to control the mind, as I don't have the power to control the wind, but when I introduce the mantra, there's a supernatural power that helps me to control the mind, or the mind becomes controlled by that, by the introduction of another power that comes in. So this is one of the ways that is suggested. And also by practice, even in ordinary circumstances. I'm not talking about meditation or metaphysics, but just people who develop good habits. There are many self-help techniques through which you can very deliberately start to, for instance, write down your goals and say, I'm going to incrementally change my life. And there's a process. In the beginning, I'm called unconsciously incompetent. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't even have the awareness that I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And then I become consciously incompetent. And that's a big step, because as soon as I notice, oh, I really am incompetent, I'm the one noticing it so that I can do something about it. Then with practice, then I become consciously competent. And with more practice, there comes mastery, which means to be unconsciously competent. Many of you who do certain exercises every day for your work or just as normal part of life, you've become so competent, you don't even know how good you are. You just do it. Somebody else might come in and say, how do you do that? It's like, do what? It just happens. So the mind is a machine, albeit a subtle machine, but it can also be developed. It can be refined and it can be strengthened through the practice of meditation and yoga and lifestyle, which we talked about previously in this class, is one of the ways that our mind is affected by is by our environment, the environment that we live in. So if we adjust the environment we live in, that is our bodily environment, the things we eat, the kinds of sounds we listen to, the people we associate with, and so forth, what we read, all these have an effect on our mind. And altogether, that lifestyle shift begins to help to bring the mind to a steady state, the state of yoga. Go ahead, JM.
No, I was just, there's another reflection on Zoom from Marcella. She says, I think something very big is the fact that even the small decisions that we may do every day have a huge impact on our lives.
Yes. It's, in fact, as I maybe mentioned in this class previously, in one of the commentaries I read on the Yoga Sutras, Vyas, one of the ancient commentators, says that yogis become so aware of the consequences of their movements in this world. He says they're as sensitive as an eyeball. And then he explains what that means. If you take a tiny hair and you put it touch it to any part of your body, you won't even notice it's there. But if you put it on the surface of your eye, you'll be irritated by it. It's so sensitive. So developing a sensitivity to the way I'm moving about the world, how I'm interacting. Remember, we talked about nonviolence. A very conscious person is aware that of ahimsa, the principle of don't envy other living beings just because they're different from you, and don't hate them because they're different from you. Don't cause harm or impede the progress of other living beings just because they're doing better than you, or just because, or you're in a more powerful position right now. Ahimsa means nonviolence. Don't, as much as possible, avoid harming others. So this is one of the principles, and somebody who's developing conscious awareness of their actual self is very careful about the way they interact with the world, not to violate dharma or the laws of the world, because they see every little move that I make has a reaction to it. So careful. And I said that in the beginning. This is called dhira. It's so a kind of soberness. It doesn't mean that you don't smile. It doesn't mean that you walk around in a bubble. But it does mean that you become sensitive to the way that the energy around you is reactive. Everything is reactive in this world. The mind is reactive. The environment is reactive. Here in San Francisco, we're looking and seeing there's some reactions. I was thinking about it. Every time an Amazon package goes, like, what's the difference, that they put in 10 times more packaging? Sorry, Amazon people. It's just an observation. Sometimes there's more packaging than I might need here. And then, where does it all go? Where do I, well, there's somewhere down the line, there's a reaction. In fact, in chaos theory, I was reading about 10 years ago, the idea of a butterfly flaps its wings in California, and by chain reaction, later on, there's a hurricane in Bermuda. That's not a theory I saw proved, but the Vedas talk about how the subtlest of decisions that we make, choices that we make, moves that we make in this world do have consequences. And so a conscious person is very much aware of that and careful. Let's see what else we have. Shall we take more for reflections or questions or slides? You decide, JM.
You have 8 minutes left. Do you want to quickly cover some more slides? Then
yeah, we might as well.
Yeah.
Well, this one's self-explanatory. We didn't even need any words up there, but I love the word consequence. Say consequence, but consequence, it's consequential. Sequence means one thing follows another. So this is the way our choices make a difference in our life. So here are a few tips. Always get as much good information as possible. The best information, according to Patanjali, according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Vyasadeva, the ancient sages all say that it comes from these wisdom literatures. So fortify yourself by hearing from a higher source of information or knowledge, so that way you can be more objective in the way you observe yourself, the way you observe your life situation, other people around you. That's the best information. But even in ordinary circumstances, before you make a choice, make sure you've got good information and as much as possible. The next. Here's a real winner. I beseech you to try this. Get a piece of paper after we're done here and just sit for a few minutes or half an hour and write down your main priorities. Don't worry about getting them in order first. You can reorder them later, and then read them out, if you like, to some trusted person and say, what do you think of these? And first of all, you'll notice that reading them to people is a very personal thing. You might even hesitate, because then you're revealing who you are and where you're going. Because when you actually have priorities set for yourself, then you can judge where a person's going to end up, because and especially if that person took the trouble to write them down. it's almost a foregone conclusion that you're going to go in that direction. And if you don't write them down, as the old saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. It doesn't really matter. You can go any which way you like. So do this, please. Get some paper and a pen and a quiet place so nobody can bother you, and really just decide inside yourself, what are my main priorities? I started with 5 and then they expanded up to 12 major ones. And I've reordered them a couple times. I've reworded them, wordsmithed them a few times. But that document is, somebody said in one of the comments, I think online just a couple of minutes ago, about a nuclear reaction or something like that. Was that true? It was very, I like that comment from Marcella. And this document sitting in your office, in your room, anywhere, even if you don't look at it after you compile it, you're going to feel it. I promise you. And it's going to help inform your decisions. It fortifies your intelligence. This is one of the most important things you can ever do. The next is, this is one of my mantras in life. And I don't put the when deciding, but I did for this particular talk, but be methodical, but dispassionate. I recommend this mantra. Be methodical means do everything that you can do. Sure, Ariana, I'll tell you in a minute. But be dispassionate about it. Just troubleshoot, go through, do what you can with what you have, and do everything that you can. Don't leave anything out, but be dispassionate, because as human beings, we have a very limited power to change our environment in a macro way. Micro way, yes, in our own minds, we have our circle of influence, but our circle of concern is much, much bigger. So don't become by passionate, I mean, or dispassionate, I mean, don't become inordinately worried about any particular situation. The outcome will come of its own accord if you do things methodically. Okay, the next is, remember that the desires you choose to pursue shape your world. So there's a metaphor given in the Bhagavad Gita, apuriyamana machala pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve nakamakami. So this is a metaphor for the ocean. And when millions of rivers from every side of the continent are running into the ocean doesn't change, but it stays the same. It's not disturbed. So a person who is fixed in consciousness also, even though desires may come, he or she doesn't pursue the ones that are already labeled as inferior desires. And that comes from making your priorities. So beware of the fact that those are going to come and that you have to make a distinction. Okay. So habits. A habit takes hold when you've stopped arguing with your choice. In other words, somewhere along the line, we made a choice for some habit. And then I always have a choice, but I may stop arguing with that choice and just let the habit prevail. So I may be too weak to argue about it, or I may not be motivated to change. So if I want to build better habits, more constructive habits, I have to do it on purpose, and they have to be maintained with support. But the choice remains. It's always there. That's part of our conscious nature, that we can make choices. We have volition. And purifying desires. This comes from practicing bhakti yoga. The desires themselves are not to be killed, but when they're refined. For instance, there are higher desires, there are lower desires. There are noble desires, there are desires for destructive measures that hurt others and hurt the world. And they're not the same. They're both desires, but one's like iron and the other one's like gold. So our desires can be purified. The same impetus is there. I'm expressing myself, my individuality, but when they become purified, then they take me to a higher position. Thank you for that ride, JM, through the the land of slides. So let's just see if we have any final reflections or questions.
Yeah. So Ariana just posted, may we know some of your priorities? And my smile came on my face.
Okay, I'll tell you one of them that's life-changing out of 12. Is that fair enough? This comes from my background. I lived in as a monk for 12 years, and really it was a product of my mindset when I grew up, which was, by the time I got to high school, I thought, what is the use of all this stuff unless I answer the bigger question? And the biggest question to me was, what is death? As I just thought, if I'm going to have to die, why do I have to work so hard now? And why shouldn't I be aware of what it is? So one of my priorities I wrote is that, and I write them all in the present tense, first person, I am prepared for death. And as soon as I wrote that down, my perspective changed. It's a very powerful kind of priority for of statement for me, because once I say that, there's a lot of implications. I notice with some people, when they leave the world, they're not really ready for it at all. They haven't thought about it. In fact, they put it off. Do you ever put anything off? Well, don't put that off. Because even in a practical way, I've seen some people leave their affairs unattended to in this world, and then they leave, and it's a huge mess for everybody. There's debts. Nobody can find the keys to anything. I've seen other people who took some time to put everything in order. So when they left, everything was ready to go. You're welcome, Marcella. And also, just from a personal point of view, find out what it is. What does it mean to leave the body? Don't stuff it or put it in the background. And I'm not saying you have to make that a priority, but I'm just saying that when I did, and I wrote it down, I committed it to paper, I walked out of my room and I was looking at the world in a very different way. So anyway, that's a suggestion. Write down your priorities and see how it changes your perspective. Okay, JM, anything else?
Yeah, if you have any questions or comments, I think V. Sanders just posted how the self-preservation or survival instinct related to the eternity of our existence, please.
Well, the body is a very sophisticated machine, and it's connected with the natural world. And the natural world means jivo jivasa jivanam. One living being is food for another. And the body is so sophisticated that it's self-preserving. Even when you are leaving the world, the organs shut down in a certain sequence to preserve the vital organs. That's why your hands and feet, because all the heat and energy is going to preserve the vital organs. That's pretty smart. And also, certain kinds of our functions in our bodies, when we're not using them at full tilt, they actually go on sleep mode. They go down to a lower level to preserve energy. Preservation is the all-pervading rule of this world. However, we're not part of that world. We are only passing through in this particular body. So how to the self-preservation or survival instinct related to the eternality of our existence? It's not really. And that's why when we identify with it, it causes us a lot of anxiety because it's against our nature. We always exist, whereas the body comes into being at a certain time and it will go out of being, if that is even a phrase that is workable. It'll stop to exist at a certain point. All the elements in this body will be reintroduced into the greater elements of the world, and all it's made out of is earth and water and fire and air. But I will continue. So, it's just our sojourn. During our sojourn in this body, we have an interlude with the natural world, and we can observe it and not become overwhelmed by it. So JM, because it's our tradition, we need to say a few mantras at the end. I talked about mantra meditation. So we're just going to say a couple of mantras today. I do suggest that you try the 21-day fitness challenge that you saw on the moniker for today's class. And the mantra meditation is introduced there at that time also. But now let's try once again, just to finish the session, to set up a little straighter than we were before and become a conduit for a higher kind of energy called mantra. So the mantra descends, it's an avatar. Avatar in Sanskrit means that which comes from a higher position beyond our purview into our present perspective and context. So the first mantra is Nitai Gauranga. The two avatars, Nitai and Gauranga. And when you say the names Nitai and Gauranga, they become manifest in your consciousness, and they'll help to open the door to higher choices, to purification of desire, and so forth. So I'll repeat this mantra 5 times, and if you like, you can follow behind muted mics. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga. Then the next mantra, which comes from the Kali Santarana Upanishad, and has this very balanced syllabary. There's 2 syllables for each word, 16 words, 32 syllables altogether. You can say it in one breath, or you can divide up your breaths and say it half and half, but we'll try doing this 5 times as well. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. These you can practice at any time along with your introspection, your meditation. We gave this today Om, and then Nitai Gauranga, and the Hare Krishna, or the Maha Mantra. And if you practice these along with your meditations, you'll get great spiritual strength, insight, and your decision-making will become empowered. You'll have a better life. You'll be objective and feel happier, I promise you. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining for another session of spiritual fitness. And I'll be counting the days till I see you next time. And I really, really appreciate that you came. And thanks, JM, for making it all work.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. See you next week.
Great attitude to you. See you soon, everybody. Please keep the transcendental vibration going.
Bye.
Bye-bye.